Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. Chris is out this week traveling. He, of course, sends his regards, hopes to be back with us next week. But as always, when Chris is out, I have my good friend, Jim Cegelski, in to join me in the conversation. Jim, welcome back to Chris McDaniel's America.
Glad to be here, Jack. Thank you.
Look, we're excited to be back another week here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement. And one of the things I wanted to talk about this week, because we've been watching, and Jim, I'm sure you've seen this as well, this civil war, it seems, that is brewing within the Democrat Party. You have the Democrats Committee Chairman, Ken Martin, and he seems to be going toe-to-toe with the Vice Chair, David Hogg. Most of our listeners are familiar with who David Hogg is. He is the activist who is very anti-gun, extreme left-wing individual. Not a fan of David Hogg remotely. But one of the things that struck me as I was reading through this story and seeing this civil war that's brewing within the Democrat Party. Now, first, I know most of you are probably thinking, well, it's great to see the Democrats infighting. It's great to see that happening, and don't disagree with you on that. But it also got me to thinking, because if you look at it, ignore the terrible candidates, as hard as it is, Jim, ignore the terrible candidates that David Hogg is trying to put forth. And just look at the ages of the ones he's trying to replace. And you see that you've got 80-year-olds, 70-plus-year-olds who have been there for 30, 40 years in these offices. And it got me thinking, this is something I would love to see a young conservative person tackle within the Republican Party. But you won't see that because most young people that are drafted into the Republican Party are instantly co-opted by the establishment. As much as I disagree with David Hogg, probably on almost every fundamental position, I see what he's going for here. And I get it. And I think that this, despite the fact that he's picking lunatic fringe left-wing candidates, this is a move I would like to see the Republicans, a young Republican, start, because we've seen, Jim, time and time again that the Republican Party has become nothing more than an incumbency protection racket. We see it, especially here in our home state of Mississippi, where we see time and time again that any insurgent candidate is already starting out behind the eight ball in every election, Jim. I know you've been paying attention to this story. So, I mean, what do you make of what David Hogg's attempting to do here?
Well, I agree with you, Jack. This, our founding fathers didn't set this up to be a lifetime commitment. Mm-hmm. If you're a politician, you're not supposed to be serving for 20, 40 years like a Joe Biden, a Nancy Pelosi, a Mitch McConnell. So I agree that, I think David Hogg's on the right track in terms of getting some young blood in to replace, corrupt lifetime politicians is what they are. But like you said, the problem with the Democrats is he's replacing them with young socialists and communist candidates. And that's the problem with the Democrat Party in general. I mean, they're a split party right now, but the split is in the Republican Party, it's MAGA versus establishment. In the Democrat Party, it's establishment versus socialist. So there's a big difference there. But I do agree, at least philosophically, going with younger blood and get rid of old establishment candidates is the right move.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the hunger comes in, especially when you look at what Ken Martin says, where he says no DNC officer should ever attempt to influence the outcome of a primary election, whether on behalf of an incumbent or a challenger. Basically, that is true. That's same for the Republican Party. They're not supposed to get involved in primary elections. I can stand by that. But how often does that actually happen? Because we've seen it with our own eyes, especially in the Republican Party, where it seems like even though they may not officially endorse anyone, you can see them guiding the hand to try to protect the
See, I
incumbent.
disagree on the fact that you said, especially in the Republican Party, if you think of the DNC, I mean, they basically installed Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. They did the same thing with Joe Biden. So the DNC has installed candidate after candidate, and they are the old-time establishment candidates. And that's where David Hogg's trying to overcome a tradition of the DNC involving themselves in this. I'm not saying the RNC doesn't do it as well. Of course they do. But I think the DNC is actually worse.
It might be. But I think I'm basing a lot of it on personal accounts in our home state of Mississippi. Maybe I'm applying more of the Mississippi GOP to the national thing.
Now, statewide, and you're talking about Mississippi. Of course, we've both been involved in state politics here. And you are correct. I mean, we saw that with our regular host here, Chris McDaniel, going up against Thad Cochran, who was really the Joe Biden of the state here. He was an old, demented, probably a really good guy in his time, but he had lost his mental facilities, and the Republican Party here, the state committee, went out of their way to make sure that they cheated so Chris McDaniel didn't win that race.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. So I think that's why this hits home to me, is because of the personal experiences and seeing what has been done within the Republican Party. You're correct in the sense that on a national level, the Democrats are far worse. But I have a personal stake having dealt with this on the state level, having been a 3-time delegate to the state convention and watched them railroad past whatever slate the governor has tapped on to be the delegates, to be the national committee chairman. You know, it's one of those things where it opened my eyes to where I'm like, why am I not actually getting a voice here? What was the purpose of me being elected to be a delegate to the convention if I get no true voice? Because the delegates, the committee members, have already been selected before I ever even show up. And all I'm supposed to do is rubber stamp it. And if you try, because we did one year, if you try to stand up to it and replace some of that, they already have the procedural ways to just move you aside and stop you. And it doesn't matter how well coached you are on believing that you can put a stop to it. It still comes through every time. And it's very frustrating experience for sure. I don't know how to change that outside of changing the entire apparatus within the party itself. And I think that's why this story struck a nerve with me. Again, remove David Hogg, remove his politics, and just look at it on its basis. Because again, Jim and I don't agree with David Hogg on anything. I can't name one thing outside of him thinking it's a good idea to purge senior citizens from his party. I can't necessarily say that I agree with that. And again, when you have a committee chairman that's up there that's citing what the policy is and what it should be, but you know that he's not enacting it. Jim pointed out the examples just a second ago of what they did to put Hillary Clinton in that seat. It was the DNC also that helped hide Joe Biden's issues.
Yeah. The DNC chairman speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He says he doesn't want David Hogg influencing primaries, but the DNC has been doing that for years. So what he really wants David Hogg to do is to lay off incumbents is what he really wants David Hogg to do, because and that's where the Republican Party is a lot like the Democrat Party. It's all about incumbents. It doesn't matter how they vote. It doesn't matter if they're rhinos. It doesn't matter if they're just really bad at their job. An incumbent and has such an advantage because they get the backing of the RNC and DNC, or on a state level, the Republican State Party, or Democrat State Party for that matter. The Republican incumbent and Democrat incumbent have such advantage, they hardly ever lose a race. Yeah.
And, when you're talking about an incumbent, they're already starting off with a war chest. They're starting off with better name ID than their challenger. In most cases, sometimes Maybe you get somebody with name ID to run against them, but in most cases, they already have better name ID. So that means the challenger is going to have to spend the first wave of cash they have on trying to make sure people know who he is. But the fact that they're already spending what little money they have on that, meanwhile, said incumbent is just dumping money to try to raise the negatives of his challenger. That is, if he thinks the challenger is a credible threat. If he doesn't, he'll never say his name. Never say it once. He'll ignore him. If they're credible, they dump tons of money on them. They send mailers out. And trust me, these people that say they don't like negative attack ads, these little old ladies that get this in the mail, they read it and they believe it.
Yes, negative attack ads work. I don't care what anybody says.
I don't like them, but I do understand
but they work. We saw them work right here in our state, and they work even on a local level. Mm-hmm. And it's a sad way to conduct yourself, but I mean, you got to go with what works. If you want to get into this game, it's a very dirty business.
Absolutely, and it's like I said, that's where it comes to me when I see somebody like Hogg here trying push this down, because again, he's the vice chair, but he's actually fighting against the establishment wing within his party. Now, yes, he wants to go to a radical left wing, but we need somebody. The Republicans need a conservative version of David Hogg, a young person that can have a little bit of charisma and maybe move the needle and battle against the establishment. Ultimately, I don't think Hogg's going to win this battle. I really don't, because I'm jaded. But I'd love to see him win this battle, just because, again, that shows us that if we actually try, maybe we could on our end. The Republican Party's supposed to be the conservative party. If you've ever read their platform, you know that it is the party that promotes conservatism. But all too often, we watch them just ignore their own platform, ignore the things that they are supposed to be for. It's not just in our state. We see it at our state capitol, but you see it on a national level constantly, where they're not fighting through the things that they're supposed to fight through. And a lot of times it's because the person that influences these career politicians more than you or I are the lobbyists. They know they've been there long enough. They know that the lobbyists can dump money in their lap anytime they want, and they can help them fight off any challenger that steps up to run against them. That's why they always have more money, because they're already in the game. You brought up the founders before. The founders, they went and served in Congress and went broke doing it.
Right.
The modern politician goes to Washington already broke and comes back a millionaire.
Or multimillionaire.
And that's a problem.
And there's a lot of examples of people just getting very wealthy. And these, I think they make in Congress maybe $200,000 a year, and they leave with tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. And no explanation. No one's yet to explain where they're getting this money from. And I would love to see that done. I think Doge might be uncovering some of this, where that money's coming from. And ultimately, Jack, it's coming from you and me.
Oh, absolutely. It's whether it's coming from a lobbyist check, it's still ultimately something that cost us.
Right.
One way or another, it's coming from you or me. And that's 100% accurate. And it's just so frustrating, because I understand that we can do better. But the problem we have nowadays, too, is you've got moms and dads out there who are trying to shuffle kids to soccer practice, baseball practice, whatever else might be on their agenda. Their lives are so hectic, so complicated. Jim, you're a parent. You went through that phase.
I did. I'm sure. And I'll be honest with you, Jack. I didn't pay as much attention to politics back when I was a 20, 30-year-old parent. I just didn't. I didn't have the time. I was coaching. I was working full-time job, commuting 2.5 hours. I mean, you just didn't come home and pay attention to the news or what was really happening nationally, or statewide for that matter. I mean, I probably knew less about what was going on in the state than I did nationally.
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing to be able to overcome. And honestly, I don't think either you or I have the answers of how we overcome it, because if somebody had the answers to that, it already would have been done.
Yeah, and that's an inherent part of the problem. But if we had a couple of different options, term limits would be stellar, but we know that is
the ultimate option right there, except you know the problem with term limits.
The other idea that I've floated constantly, and it's one that I also think would never happen. I'm a big sports fan, Jim. You know that. I follow pro sports, college sports, enjoy sports.
Really bad teams, but yes.
No, well, I mean, at least they don't have that ugly shade of red that some people like. But besides the point, the fact that most sports leagues, with the exception of Major League Baseball, they have a salary cap in place. Even Major League Baseball's fighting to get a salary cap, I think, in their next collective bargaining agreement. They want that. And the reason is they want to try to keep the teams on a level playing field. It doesn't always work out, mind you. Their teams, see the Cleveland Browns, that just never seem to compete. But the salary cap does give you that shot, gives you a better shot of being able to compete with the big franchises like the ones in New York, Chicago, LA, all these big cities. If you've got a franchise in New Orleans, you can compete with them because they're going to be held on that equal playing field with you. The idea that I've always floated, and I know it'll never happen, and I'm going to say that up front, I know this will never happen, is couldn't we have a campaign salary cap where you can't spend over a certain amount?
I mean, that's common sense. Yeah. We should have that.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that, Kamala Harris spent like $1 billion this past election is absurd. Think of what $1 billion could do for the country. I mean, for poor people, that money could be so much better spent. $1 billion for a losing campaign was spent. And listen, I agree 100%. And I don't know why we can't have a campaign cap either. There should definitely be a campaign cap.
Well, I can tell you why that we won't, but same reason we won't have term limits. People that would have to vote to enact it are the ones that it would suffer at the hands of it. And they're not willing to do that because they know right now the system is rigged in favor of them. So that's why we wouldn't have it, but it is a no-brainer. You brought up Kamala Harris spending over $1 billion on a failed campaign. That just speaks to how terrible of a candidate she was, because normally, in normal circumstances, the candidate with that much more money to burn wins every time. There are exceptions, but most of the time, I think it's safe to say probably 90% of the time, the candidate, and I'm not talking about like, Jim has a little bit more money than me and we run again. I'm talking about Jim has millions more than me. Jim is way ahead of me when it comes to campaign funding. How do I compete with that? I'm not going to be able to offset any negative ads he throws out. I'm not going to be able to offset the fact that he's got better name ID than me. I'm not going to be able to offset any of that. So by putting in a spending cap and saying that, hey, once you hit this, you can't spend any more. Now, of course, they'll find ways around it. They'll probably just say, well, the super PACs are excluded from that. And then they have their workaround. So even if they did put something in place, they'd find a way around it. We know, because they don't want to give up the rigged system. But when we look at this and we see an effort being made, because again, David Hogg is the vice chair of the Democrat Party. He's not, even though he's a young guy, he's not a small potato within the Democrat Party. He has worked his way up, whatever brown nosing he had to do to get there, to be the vice chair of the party. And he's going toe-to-toe with the chairman. I don't think he's going to back down either. I think he's going to push and endorse candidates. And to me,
I think he might be made to resign, though. I think
that may happen.
I think he's probably going to have to resign, and he'll continue to push for these younger candidates. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the move he should do. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if the DNC chairman doesn't want you there anymore, and has the rule in place where you're not allowed to endorse candidates, I think his only other option is to resign. And I think that's what's probably going to happen here. Mm-hmm. But that will free him up to raise money for these people, which is what he did before, by the way. I mean, he raised money for candidates of his preference. Terrible candidates. Let's get that out there once again. And they're just horrible. But I am with you in theory. What he's doing makes a lot of sense for the Democrats,
Mm-hmm.
and it would also make a lot of sense for the Republicans as well, because we know these establishment candidates who've been in there for 30, 40 years, every one of them's corrupt.
Yeah.
Every one of them at this point is corrupt. I don't know anybody who's in politics for 30 or 40 years that there's not some semblance of corruption behind it. And that we really need a wholesale change of the system. But like you and I have just talked about, it's almost impossible to have that happen.
Well, you talked about exactly, seeing what Martin says right here about David Hogg. He says, but the DNC chair added that he understands what Hogg is trying to do. But he said, I've said to him, if you want to challenge incumbents, you're more than free to do that, but not as an officer of the DNC, because our job is to be neutral arbitrators. And I wish that they were. Yeah. I really wish that they would stay neutral, but we know, and that's the issue I have here with statements like that. Martin's not a neutral arbitrator.
And there you go. Hogg should come right back at him and just give example after example of where the DNC wasn't neutral at all. And Bernie Sanders should come out and take a shot at the DNC for that statement alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hogg responded in a series of social media posts where he said the role of the DNC is to set the presidential primary calendar, set the presidential debate schedule, to help strengthen our state parties, play key roles in building our data infrastructure for the party, and to be the campaign in waiting for whoever the next Democrat nominee is. Nothing I'm doing is at odds with any of that. And of course, when he says that, part of me is like, okay, but I agree with you. He should be pushing back by saying where they have done things in the past. Instead, he just gives what reads like a pre-written lawyer statement to give back to them. And that's where he says that the DNC is trying to change the rules because I'm not currently breaking them. As we're seeing law firms, tech companies, and so many others bowing to Trump, we all must do whatever position of power we have to fight back. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So he's trying to claim that there's no bylaw he's breaking within the DNC. I'll be honest with you. I don't know the DNC's bylaws. It sounds like they have a bylaw preventing officers from being involved in a primary. That would be my assumption, that actually is the bylaw, having served within the Republican Party. That would be my assumption. What he should be doing, instead of saying that, he should be calling out their hypocrisy. Right. But he's not doing that, because I don't think, again, despite the fact that we like the approach he's taken with the DNC, I've never thought David Hogg to be a smart individual. And based on every time I hear him speak, he's not a smart guy.
No, I will say this. This does point out, I think, the one thing you could be impressed with the Democrats over the past, 2 decades, is their solidarity. Mm-hmm. Like, they have stuck together. It's the only thing that's really made them a strong party for a while, is the fact that they don't really crack. Yeah. So this is actually the first crack in that facade. You can see this becoming a real fissure that creates two very distinct camps in the Democrat Party. And again, I can't stand her, but Nancy Pelosi was a genius in keeping that crack sealed up with cement, like precision. She was amazing in the fact that no one ever, when they vote as a block. There's no dissent whatsoever for most of the Congress and the Senate, for that matter. But you can actually see two camps forming here, which could really tear that party apart. Not that it's a mess right now anyway, because they're such a failed party and they take the most ridiculous stances you can possibly imagine. But the fact that they seem to be coming apart, there's the David Hogg young progressive camp now, and the old Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer establishment camp. And I really think they're going to come to heads here, come to blows, and I think that's a good thing.
I definitely think that's a good thing. We've seen type of disruptions within the Republican Party in the past, when the Tea Party came on and they took on the establishment, you saw a weakening there, and that helped Obama stay in office for years. That was something that was a problem until Trump came along.
And I think the problem with the Tea Party, and I was a pro Tea Party guy. The problem with the Tea Party, they didn't have somebody like a Trump to lead them. There was no just dynamic leader that came to the forefront, and you thought, oh well, this is a movement. Yeah. Whereas Trump actually was such a dynamic, he did actually start a movement, and it was a grassroots movement, as was the Tea Party. I mean, the Tea Party started at the grassroots level, but so did the MAGA movement. I think the only difference is Trump.
And I think that's where you're going to see the Civil War with the Democrats go. I think you're going to see the insurgents like the David Hoggs and them, they're going to get gobbled up in the end. But the fun part's going to be, how long does it take before they get gobbled up? How long will it last until, will it cost them elections? When Trump's term ends, will that help usher in a J.D. Vance or, another conservative Republican
candidate? And I think
candidate?
It does, Jack, but only because they're going to be counting on somebody like an AOC or a Jasmine Crockett to lead this movement that's going to take on the establishment. Well, these people are stupid.
Yeah.
Like, they're really dumb. I mean, you can go back and look at past statements they've said, and it's like kindergarten level stuff. That's not going to work. The American public isn't that stupid. There's stupid people out there. I mean, just look at all the people that voted for Kamala Harris. But there's not enough stupid people. They're going to go leap into the AOC camp or the Jasmine Crockett camp. That's just not going to happen. And I don't see another leader out there on the Democrat side at all. I mean, you can talk about, Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer, but they're the establishment. Yeah. Camp of the Democrat Party.
And they're already taking arrows from this wing that we were just talking about. So they're already taking arrows. So they're not going to rally that base. What's going to happen is you're going to see them be at odds. You're going to probably see the David Hogg AOC wing be more willing to stay at home than show up and actually
I'm
go
not
up.
even 100% positive they won't break off and form their own socialist party. They're that radical. At some point, even the establishment part of the Democrat Party. Now, this is where Nancy Pelosi was a genius. She could keep those factions together, but at some point, they've gone so far to the left, and they won't give it up. They're not going to give up the trans stuff. They're not going to give up. There's more than two genders. They're just not giving up and they're not going to give up open borders. And the establishment people in the Democrat Party, they know those are losing causes. So I would not actually be surprised if the progressives actually break off from the Democrat Party and form their own socialist party.
Absolutely. Well, you've got folks like James Carville who've said you need to get away from this.
He's turned insane. What has happened to him?
Well, he's always been insane, but he's actually been one of the ones saying you got to lay off these topics, like the trans topic. He's pointing out to the Democrats, these are the losing issues and nobody's listening.
Okay, he might come across sane in that respect, but I think just yesterday or day before, he basically said for somebody to kill Trump.
Oh, wow. I mean, missed that
he's literally gone off the deep end. He's insane. I believe he's now a Mississippi resident. Is that true?
I don't know.
Somebody said he lives in Bay St. Louis.
I would have to look that up, but can we ship him back to Louisiana?
Oh my gosh, please.
I think it's time to pay some bills. So we'll pause right here for a quick commercial break.
Resort.
All right, guys, welcome back here to Chris McDaniel's America. We've been talking about this Democrat civil war that's waging and just our thoughts on it and how much we'd love to see conservatives try to reassert themselves within the Republican Party as well. But it's also time to talk about the lunatic Democrat fringe, because I don't know if you've seen this yet, Jim, but there's a group of progressive leaders who are trying to target conservative town halls. Like if it's I don't even think conservative. I think Republican town halls is probably what they're targeting, because I think most insane progressives view all Republicans as conservatives unless they've seen example of them not being conservative. They're trying to target them for protest, which means disruption, which means instead of you and I being able to attend a town hall and actively being able to ask our congressman or our senator a serious question, they're there to disrupt and just run the thing amok. And again, to me, this is simple. Beef up your security, get them out when they start. But one of the things that I find troubling for years, and I remember when we had our previous congressman in our area, and his people told us they can't have town halls because they're worried about Democrats showing up and disrupting. Just the other day, talking with our current congressman and his handler told me that that's why they haven't done them. They're worried about these disruptions happening. And to me, I view that as an excuse. I don't think that is accurate. I don't think that's why they're not having the town halls, because I can tell you the one before them stopped doing them before there was any idea of Democrat protest. And it's always been okay when the Democrats hold a seat and we go and we ask them tough questions. That's not disruptions. We're encouraged to do that. Now, don't get me wrong. If this is just protest to disrupt, that's wrong. Have your security, get them removed. But that's not an excuse to not come home and answer questions from the people.
Jack, I agree with you, especially here in Mississippi. There's no excuse here. Mm-hmm. Let's face it. I mean, we're not a bastion of Democrat protesters here. If Mike Ezell's not holding a town hall because he's scared of protests, that's just an excuse not to hold a town hall and not to answer some tough questions. I can see it if there's a Republican New York congressman, and there's a couple of them, and they're expecting 10,000 people to show up and create a riot. I can see it there, but there's no excuse here in Mississippi for sure. And I agree that, if there's a couple protesters, you haul their butts right out of there, or if they're there to answer legitimate or ask legitimate questions, answer them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's always been my problem. And that's, again, Congressman Ezell, whoever else is listening, our senators, you're there to represent us. Come home and face the people. If you're doing a good job, you'd be more than willing to. I mean, it, Jim. If they didn't expect to get some type of criticism, they would be the first one to line up, come home, and get praised. They have no problem coming into town and meeting with city mayors. They have no problem coming back in town, sitting down with a city council member. But they have a problem holding a town hall and talking to average, everyday voters, because they know they're going to be people there, not just Democrats, by the way. They're going to be conservatives that show up, and they're going to ask you difficult questions. They're not ready for that. They're not prepared to answer the difficult questions.
Well, I have a personal experience with Mike Ezell asking difficult questions of him, and I know how uncomfortable he was having those questions. And there was in relation to Chris McDaniel's campaign, actually. But he looked like a deer in headlights, and I'm sure he doesn't want to answer tough questions. But he owes it to the people of Mississippi to do just that.
Well, here's the thing, too. If that's your reason for why you're not going to have a town hall, be a man and tell us. Because then it can help inform our decision on who to vote for.
But is he being a man if you admit that you're not doing it because you're scared?
No, I don't think so. I mean, one of the things that I always, and again, Chris, if you're watching, we're sorry to brag on you for a second, but one of the things I always admired about Chris during campaign stops when he was in the Senate there in Jackson, Chris always was willing to answer questions. He would hold his own town hall, whether it was virtual, online, or whatever. He was willing to face the people and talk to them. And not just people of his district, people throughout the state, people in other states. He was willing to answer questions from anybody that came up with one, didn't run from them.
But you know why, Jack? He's a man of conviction.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything to run from. He told you, he was a lot like Trump in the fact that he told you what he was going to vote for, and then he went out and voted for it.
Yeah.
And he never wavered from his convictions. And that's why most of the politicians don't want to. They'll tell you one thing. As a matter of fact, Mike Gazelle sat in this studio one time telling us that he was a strong conservative voice, but then turned around and threw his support to basically a Democrat for lieutenant governor. And that's why him and I got into it.
Not basically, is a Democrat.
So, you can't be a strong conservative and vote for our current lieutenant governor here in Mississippi, because the man is nothing more than a Democrat. So that's the reason most politicians don't want to hold town halls. It's the reason Chris McDaniel could, because he had nothing to be ashamed of. He had nothing to hide.
He never wavered. And being somebody who helped with some of his campaigns, I know sometimes we got nervous when he would take questions. It was like, what's he going to answer? But he always handled it well. We had no justification to be nervous that he was taking unscripted Q&As. It's just the nature of anybody helping a campaign.
I think Chris McDaniel and Donald Trump are the best examples of people that can take questions anytime, anywhere, because they're actually telling you the truth. I mean, Trump campaigned on certain issues, and that's what he's doing. He campaigned on tariffs. You might hate tariffs, you might love tariffs, but he said he was going to implement tariffs. Yeah. He said he was going to close the border. He said he was going to deport the gang members. He's doing exactly what he said, so there's no reason for him to hide from the press. It was the same thing with Chris McDaniel, but that's not how most politicians handle themselves. Nope. They will tell you one thing when they're campaigning and then do another thing when they're in office, and then it's really hard to do a town hall. Yeah,
it really is when you have to face the people and explain a terrible record. Chris didn't have it. Every now and then, maybe he had to explain a vote that somebody disagreed with him on, and he always was able to do it. And even if that person at the end of the day still didn't agree with him on that vote, he at least admired the fact that Chris would sit down and say, here's what happened.
Right.
This is why we went that direction. And that, to me, is what separated him and the very rare breed of what I consider a statesman and not a politician from the sea of politicians that we're left with. Because sadly, that's what we're left with in Washington, is just people that they're not there for us. They're there for them.
Well, I actually think it's probably close to 90% of politicians aren't actually going into office and doing what they tell us they're going to do. And that's a big percentage. Yeah. I think there is 10% that actually are genuine. They actually, and on both sides, Democrat and Republican. Yeah. I mean, you might dislike the Democrat, but as long as he tells you what he's really going to do, and then he gets into office, I mean, it's hard to argue with. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a good example. I can't stand the guy, but he tells you he's a socialist. Yeah. He's not hiding that fact. And if people in his state want to vote for him, so be it. But you got to respect the people. But that's 10%. Everybody else is out there telling you what they think you want to hear, and then they're doing something else.
It's sickening when you really think about it. And that's the reason why you have a desire for someone to go out there and try to cut out the old guard. There's a reason why we see somebody we fundamentally disagree with in a David Hogg attempting to do that within the Democrat Party. And we wish that we had somebody similar doing that for conservatives within the Republican Party. It's not about Hogg. It's about what he represents and what he's attempting to do in the party. Now, have you heard of the so-called Biden effect that is going on in Democrat circles in Congress?
Were they all falling down, losing their mind? Or?
It's different from that. There seems to be congressional longevity, Democrats who have been there for a long time, who have announced that they are not going to seek re-election. The most recent one, Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois, he's announced he's not seeking re-election after nearly 4 decades in Congress. And again, as we've seen, the Biden effect, as they're talking about, they're comparing that to when President Joe Biden was politically pushed out after the disastrous debate. Since then, several senators, mostly Democrats, and many above private sector retirement age have announced their retirement. So they're calling it the Biden effect. That I guess they're fearing that maybe they're going to be put on a stage, they're going to be exposed for not being mentally fit to run for office. And instead of having that happen, they're doing what Biden probably should have done in the first place, and they're going ahead and getting out before they get exposed. It's one of those things that it definitely points out, because you can go down the list. You had Durbin, who was 80, Gene Sheehan from New Hampshire, 78, Tina Smith from Wisconsin, 67, Gary Peters from Michigan, 66, and of course, well, you can call him a Democrat because he's a rhino, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, 83. All of these above the retirement age. Do you think that they would be announcing their retirement if Joe Biden hadn't been forced off the ticket last year? Do you think that if Joe Biden had been allowed to stay on, do you think that they would continue to maintain? Because most of these people, we've seen it recently, they die in office. They don't give up the office. They are going to pass away still holding that title. These people aren't, Jim, and they're calling it the Biden effect. Do you see something to that?
I'm not sure, Jack. I actually think some of it has to do with the fact that they see a very bleak near future. I mean, they don't have a long future. If you're talking people in their 80s, late 70s and 80s, there's not a long future there. And I don't think they see a positive, bright future in the next 10 years for the Democrat Party. So I think that's the reason that Dick Durbin's getting out. I will say this, they still have a bunch of old people hanging on and refusing to get out. Like Nancy Pelosi's been asked to get out, and she's refusing. And I think she's 85 and
she's up there,
and she really is turning into Joe Biden. She's fallen down and broken her hip, I believe, she was, I think just today, making a speech and forgot to turn her microphone on. So she's literally turning into Joe Biden and refusing to get out. I think the people that are still within their right minds, like a Dick Durbin, I couldn't stand the dude, but he's still with it. And those other ones you mentioned, I think they just don't see too much of a future for the Democrats in the near term.
You know, and you're probably onto something there, but I also think there's got to be a little bit more to it, because I don't think they care as much about the future of the Democrats. As long as their pockets are still getting lined, I don't think they care as much.
Well, I mean, you might be right there. Maybe this could be a result of Doge. Maybe some of this stuff's going to come out where these people, maybe we're going to find out how these people got wealthy, and they're bailing now before that information gets out there. That's a possibility.
Maybe. It's got to be something, but I can definitely see where the Biden effect is a real thing, because again, one of these things, these people who have been up there for 30, 40 years, they're egomaniacs. They're all about legacy now. The last thing they want to have happen to them, Jim, is they don't want all the cameras, all the spotlight on them to where you can see that they aren't the person they once were. They don't want that to be their lasting memory. It was too late for Mitch McConnell. He's already had Biden moments, not singular, Biden moments that we can talk about. But somebody like a Dick Durbin, I can't necessarily off the top of my head point to a Joe Biden moment for him. Maybe it's happened and I just didn't see it. So I can see them going like, ugh, if I stick around, somebody's going to catch where I'm slipping. And then my legacy turns into that. Because like Joe Biden, hate Joe Biden, his lasting memory in a lot of people's minds is going to be that disastrous debate. It just is what it is. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. The lasting memory is going to be that
I'm just
debate.
not even sure that's much of a low light compared to the rest of his career. I mean, his entire career was really pathetic.
But he was able to run from all that pathetic. Like he had to drop out of a presidential. Was it 1988 when he had to drop out for plagiarism?
Yeah, and before that, he had cheated on tests in law school. He was friends with racists. He just was and really always everybody in Congress knew, or in the Senate knew, he was a dumb guy. It was well known he was a dumb guy. He just got carried along, and for really no reason. And his whole career is going to go down as one of the most pathetic of any politician in history.
But you see my point. All that other stuff was able to brush away. He was still able to rise above it somehow. But the one thing he'll never be able to brush off, because he didn't get a second act after that debate. You saw Kamala Harris's team, they brushed him aside. They didn't want him on the campaign trail anywhere close to them because they saw him as a liability. So his lasting memory for a lot of Americans, whether you're Republican or Democrats, going to be that horrendous debate. And I think that plays a factor in what some of these folks are viewing. They don't want that to be their lasting memory. And I think that is. So I do think there's something to the Biden effect. And I encourage more of you career politicians who've been there for 40 years to follow in Dick Durbin's footsteps. Come home. It's time. It's been past. Should have probably done it 25 years ago, but it is what it is.
We might not be able to get term limits, but we should at least be able to get a retirement age.
I agree with that. I mean, we need an age cap.
I mean, and I think maybe that is something should be brought up in the legislature. I mean, enough young people are in there that maybe they would vote for a retirement age, even though they probably wouldn't vote for term limits. And I've never heard anybody talk about it. Have you?
No, I've brought it up once or twice. I don't know if I've done it on this show, but I know I've brought it up on the right side for sure. Because again, you have to be a certain age before you can be president.
Right.
So we have age limits on when you're old enough to run for an office. To me, there's a common sense there to put an age cap as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if I can't run for an office until I'm 38, 40 years old, then why don't I do the same where I look at it? And again, this isn't hating on the elderly at all. But most older people, will be honest with you, they're not able to recall things the way they were. I'm guilty.
I'm guilty over here, Jack. I can tell you right now, I'm 60, going on 61. No, I'm going on 62. See, I can't even remember my age. And I forget things all the time. I'm not as sharp as I was when I was back in my 40s or even my 50s. And the fact that these people are in there when they're 80, some pushing 90 is absurd.
It's crazy, and it was never intended to be this way. And that could be a simple fix. Make it 75.
Yeah,
and you're done running. You're done. It saved us from Biden. Yeah, it might would have cost us being able to have Trump win this time, but we would have never had Biden in the first place. So maybe he wins re-election the first time anyway. Well, so it's not even a point.
I say he did win re-election. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm pretty sure he did win re-election.
I don't disagree with you, but from the historical standpoint, It says he took an L. We can talk about the tricks and stuff that were pulled so he took an L another time. But that's the thing. We would have never even had Joe Biden as a candidate. And he was the best shot the Democrats had in 2020 was Biden because of his name ID.
Well, and because the other alternative was Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
and America would have had to just come out and say, okay, we're going to vote for a socialist at that point. And I don't think that would have happened. Although sometimes America scares me.
That's fair. That is fair. But no, you see these things and you look at it and it makes sense that, yes, they all saw what happened to Joe Biden. and their ego tells them, I don't want that to happen to me. Now, speaking of news that is probably the type of news that would make you just go like, well, duh. Did you see where MSNBC host Jen Psaki admitted on Tuesday that her cable news network's liberal leading audience only tunes into coverage of President Trump that is typically not going to be positive?
Wow, I didn't know she admitted it, but yeah, duh.
I mean, she flat out said it, and she said there's obviously a rooted value in the kind of that MSNBC viewers expect of like what we're going to talk about the opposition, and we're going to talk about what the opposing party is up to in terms of the Democrats, and we're going to talk about future leaders and things. That's a bad statement. Just reading it out loud made my head hurt. She was a press secretary for the White House at one time.
Not only and she was better than the last one that Biden had. So
and she wasn't good.
No.
He says that she continues, she said, and we're also going to talk about Trump, and it's typically not going to be positive. I don't think anybody watching expects it to be positive, right? There's not like a North Star thing written on a card and everybody does it slightly differently, but I think that's fairly the vibe. So, I mean, she said she said this thing we already knew out loud. She told the secret out loud. Is this similar to like when a wrestler tells you that, hey, you know what, all of our matches are scripted. We know who's going to win before it starts.
I think it's exactly the same thing because we all knew wrestling was fake, except for maybe 3 people. And I think we all know MSNBC is fake, except for 3 people.
Yeah. Sadly, I think it's more than 3. It's the lunatic fringe that they're catering to.
Yeah, but the lunatic fringe, I think they even know how ridiculous they are. I really do. And I'll go back to this a million. I think Trump derangement syndrome really is a real thing. And I think they have such a bad case for it. I think they know. I think most of them know that the trans issue is ridiculous. Yeah. I think most of them know there's only 2 genders. I think most of them know that the border needed to be closed and that we can't have billions of people just coming into the country the way we do, but they have to stick with it because it's anti-Trump.
Absolutely. And that's where they stick.
You see those cartoons of Trump, cured cancer. All of a sudden they'd be for cancer. I really do think I think there's a point to this. For them to argue some of the points that they've tried to argue against Trump, like Doge. Well, who's against uncovering corruption?
Well, even
in the government,
even crazier than Doge, they are taking a wife-beating gang member and turning him into the face of the anti-Trump movement. They're trying to bring this guy back to the United States of America.
That's the perfect example of what I'm trying to say. Is I think the lunatic left really has fallen into a trap here. I mean, if Trump, I think Trump really could just say the most basic things like 1 + 1 = 2, and they're going to disagree with him.
It's 7.
Yeah. and keep up with that because you keep losing, there are more and more people who go, okay, I don't want any part of that. And it's really, helped Republicans.
Yeah, it has. And when you see this on its face, and you understand they're saying the quiet part out loud and you're learning things you already knew, but it is refreshing to see them admit it, mind you. But the insanity that we still see within this Trump derangement syndrome. Jim, I know people that were staunch conservatives. They fought with us on conservative values that are now posting socialist messages. And the only reason why they switched is because Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. I've called them out and you and I've had these conversations.
On a national level, Bill Kristol was a major conservative pundit. You always went to him for the conservative message. And he's now a socialist pretty much. It's crazy. It's local. It's statewide. It's national. It's everywhere. And the only thing you can think of is, there is a mental condition, and it's a real mental condition.
It is. I mean, Michael Savage used to say that liberalism is a mental disorder. Well, we're taking on another mental disorder here, because and when I talk about those people, and I still consider them friends, I'm not abandoning a friend because they disagree with, but I will call them out and point out to them, say, this goes counter. The stuff you're posting now goes counter to everything that you and I used to talk about and agree on. What gives? And they'll, I see what Trump's doing, and it's fascism, and I'm like, remove Trump from the equation and tell me why you think we should be taxing the more productive members at a higher rate. Why are you fighting for an increase in minimum wage when you know that that's going to make the cost of all your goods go up? It's these type arguments that I had with them for years, and they were on my side, and then Trump comes in, and now all of a sudden they're going the other side. A, it tells me that you were never strongly convicted in what you believe in the first place, that you were always easy to be pushed. And B, it tells me that you're so weak-willed that you just have a strong dislike for Donald Trump that you'll change your entire point of view. And I just can't do that. Look, I can agree if somebody points out stuff, because there's stuff that Trump does that I don't always agree with. There's stuff that Trump does that I may not necessarily care for. But at the same time, I'm not going to change my entire conviction and criticize him on all the points I do agree with him on, because it doesn't work.
Better than that, you're not going to become a Bernie Sanders fan because you don't like Donald Trump.
Never.
I mean, and some people have. It's crazy, and I don't get it, and I don't understand it.
It's just an insane, and I think you do just go ahead and, trump it up, pun intended, to Trump derangement syndrome, because there's no other explanation for it. They are allowing their dislike of a personality to overrule everything that they once held as their strong convictions.
And it's even worse than that. Even overrule common sense.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, to me, most of Trump's policies are common sense. I mean, the tariffs is something a little bit different. I mean,
it's a gamble.
It's a gamble, but I think the man's standing up for America, and it needed to happen because we've been getting taken advantage of. But I can see people arguing the other side of that because, they have a lot of money in the stock market or something like that. But I can't see anyone arguing closing the border.
No.
Yet
deporting gang members.
But there's a whole bunch of people, because Trump's on the other side of that are making that point. And that's a sad statement to make about our country, or some of our fellow countrymen, at least.
Yeah, 100% accurate on that. And that's the thing. If you want to come to me with a policy point that you disagree with Donald Trump on, I'm all ears. I'll sit down and talk to you. But if your first point of contention is, I just hate Trump, I don't want to listen to you anymore, because now I know you're not coming to me from a logical, rational point of view. And I've said it constantly. Liberalism is all about emotion. It's not about logic and reason. It's about how you feel. It's about your emotional response. And I think that's why some of these folks that are severely suffering from Trump derangement syndrome have made a push to the left, because, again, they are just finding the things that make them feel a certain way, and they run to that. It's frustrating for sure to see, but it's not surprising anymore, because we have seen it now for the better part of 9 years. So we have seen it time and time again. Here's the thing. If Trump does something you don't agree with, call him out for it. But when he does something that you do agree with, don't change your position because now Trump's on the side you were originally on. That's just stupid.
Right. Plain
Plain and simple. Jim, I think we're running out of time on this episode. And of course, as always, enjoy when you get to come in with me. And we always, I know Chris thanks you every time as well for being able to sit in when he can't be here.
I appreciate you putting up with me, Jack.
It's more than putting up with. It's a good time. Well, again, thank you, Jim. This has been Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.